Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about 6 things that I wish I knew when I first started my journey in behavioral economics. So the first thing that I know now that I wish I knew then was that to have a job in behavioral economics, you don't actually need to know that much economics. I used to spend so many hours perfecting my demand graphs, my inflation curves, calculating expected utility, when actually in reality in my day-to-day job at the moment, we barely use any of those economic models at all. Instead, we mainly use insights from the world of psychology in order to help businesses and organizations achieve their goals. Because at the end of the day, our clients don't really care that behavioral economics is different to neoclassical economics.
Hello, I'm behavioral economics.
And I'm standard economics.
We have this different model of human behavior and yada yada yada. It's not really that interesting to them. Instead, what they care about more is just what is the insight and how is that going to help them achieve their goals. And nearly all of those insights come from the world of social psychology and not from economics. Now, don't get me wrong, if you want to be an academic who works in behavioral economics, then you do need to be familiar with those economic models because your papers will be about showing how people behave differently to those models or about showing how people do behave more like those models than some behavioral economists might suggest. But if you want to have a job like mine, working as a behavioral science consultant, you don't actually need to learn that much economics. So if you're struggling with economics and you want to have a job like mine, don't fret. It's okay. The second thing that I know now that I wish I knew then was how broad the applications of behavioral science are. You know, when you first get into behavioral economics, you learn a few of the kind of interesting intellectual brain puzzles that kind of tease your brain as to how this stuff might be interesting. You might learn about, Linda was a bank teller, that classic example. You learn about The Economist magazine. But in terms of broad application and having real impact on people's lives, it can be pretty difficult to find that information. But now that I work as an applied behavioral scientist, I can see that the applications of behavioral science is so broad. We can do everything from designing the most beautiful user interfaces in a customer journey to literally helping people avoid getting blown up by landmines in Afghanistan. That's real, by the way, I didn't make that up. I find it so interesting how these principles of psychology and our decision making can be applied to such a vast array of fields in order to help people achieve greater health, greater wealth, and greater happiness. The third thing I wish I knew then that I know about now is how to actually introduce the concept of behavioral science to people who haven't been introduced to it before, because it's still a bloody nightmare, to be honest, trying to tell someone what the hell behavioral science actually is. So here's a little explanation that I like to use that can give people a kind of flavor and get their cogs whirring as to how behavioral science might be useful to them. What I like to say is that the marketing and advertising industry has been spending millions and billions of dollars every single year to try and figure out what persuades people to do something. And what we do in behavioral science is take those insights, test them rigorously in the academic and scientific field, and then apply them to a wide range of different problems that might be able to help people in more interesting ways than just trying to sell them something. And then it's always useful just to give a few different examples. So I would say, for example, we apply behavioral science to help people reduce their food waste and convince them that eating less is okay. Or we can say that we can apply the science of persuasion and motivation to the world of charitable donations and change the way that charities ask for donations in order to encourage people to donate more and therefore increasing the ability of that charity to do good things in the world. And generally what I find is that that little 1-minute sell-in, that little elevator pitch, generally tends to give people a good idea of what you do roughly, and it helps them to figure out, that might be useful to me because I'm trying to get people to do X. I'm trying to persuade my staff to do this. I'm trying to persuade my customers to do this. I'm trying to persuade X, Y, and Z to do something else. And then they kind of figure out that behavioral science might actually be something worth looking into. Okay, so the fourth thing that I wish I knew is that not everything that I was reading in the book still holds water scientifically today. Ideas like implicit priming, ego depletion, and power posing, these were some of the most exciting ideas coming out of the world of behavioral science when I first read about them, but today when they were put under scientific scrutiny after other scientists tried to replicate the results, after these ideas were tested with better methodologies, they don't seem to hold up anymore. The effects are either vastly over-exaggerated or completely non-existent. And this is an ongoing struggle that I have in terms of updating my knowledge with what is the current scientific consensus in the community. It feels like every few months there's some idea that I read about years ago that I've been preaching to be true to other people, and I get told that actually this doesn't hold up anymore when put under more rigorous scientific methods. But Being a great behavioral science practitioner, or just a great behavioral scientist in general, means that you have to be open to this idea of change, that these ideas, even if you've been telling other people that these are true before, you have to be willing to accept that maybe you were wrong, that maybe these ideas that you thought were right don't hold up anymore. And that's what actually separates the good behavioral scientists from the great ones, because the great ones are willing to update their beliefs and therefore design interventions around the insights that are more rigorous and more likely to actually work and make an impact. The fifth thing I wish I knew, which kind of applies to any industry to be honest, was how to brand myself within the industry. Because getting a job in behavioral science is so competitive, it is really difficult to differentiate yourself from everybody else. So just like how brands need to have a USP, a unique selling point, it's really beneficial if you yourself also have a USP. For me, I was very lucky that I happened to make friends with Professor Wendy Wood, who taught me lots about habits, and so then I could brand myself as a habit expert within this industry. And I like to think that now I have the knowledge base to back that claim up. But it was really a happy coincidence. But a lot of people I know who want to get a job in behavioral science don't really have a kind of unique superpower that makes them different to the other applicants. They just say, well, I'm interested in behavioral science and I've been studying it, but that doesn't make you unique compared to everybody else who also says the same thing. If I think about the people who work on my team, many of us have our own different specialties. We have someone who specializes in the behavioral science of sustainability, someone who specializes in the behavioral science of charitable donations, someone who specializes in the creative application of behavioral science. There are basically different people on my team with different specialties within this overarching umbrella of behavioral science. So even though we function as one team, we're not a homogenous group of people. Instead, we're kind of like a psychology version of the Avengers, each with our own superpowers, and we can apply them depending on what the problem we're trying to deal with is. So if you're a young person in the world of behavioral science, consider trying to brand yourself by focusing in and learning a lot about one particular aspect of behavioral science, one particular type of decision that people are making, and it'll make you a lot more hireable and help differentiate you in the job market. And the sixth thing, which I wish I knew, was just that the world of behavioral science is freaking cool. Sometimes when you're starting out in the world of behavioral science, it can feel pretty isolating because you don't know anybody else who's into it, you can't really talk about it with anybody else, and so you kind of feel a bit lonely. But actually, if you look online, if you go out there and you start meeting people, and definitely when you start working in the industry, you realize that there are thousands and thousands of people who are interested in this field of behavioral science, of behavioral economics. It is a huge community of people who are really passionate about this stuff just because it's freaking cool, man. So if you're watching this video because you're into behavioral science but you don't know anybody else who is, I assure you that there are thousands and thousands of people who are also interested in this field, and it is freaking cool. So I hope that makes you feel better, and I hope this video was useful to you. If you enjoyed it, can you please give me a thumbs up because it really helps me out, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.